I dare say that in the last few weeks you've been invited to, and may even have attended, a party or shindig, as we would say here in Scotland. There are works nights out, family get-togethers, catch-ups with mates, to perhaps a club's festive feast, a Hogmanay or New Year's Eve party, or a number of other reasons people get together around this time of year. The invite you received may have been as simple as a text, or it could have been a long-standing tradition. Perhaps you received one of those fancy invites on a embossed card. You may have been very pleased to accept the invite. I dare say that some listening might have been given an invite to an event they would have loved to have been at, but were unable to make. Then there were those who were invited to an event that you'd rather not have been at. I was in that situation. I was invited to my works night out, and I avoided it like the plague. The drinking that inevitably leads to fighting, unsurprisingly, does not appeal to me. There are some parties that would have had a negative impact on you were you not to attend. Perhaps the party would have been less fun without you in attendance. Perhaps it is that it is the social event of the year and you simply must be there. There's a story in the Bible about a great man who planned and threw a great feast, a party. Jesus tells the story in Luke chapter 14, starting at verse 16. A man once gave a great banquet and invited many. And at the time for the banquet, he sent to his servant to say to those who had been invited, "Come, for everything now is ready." But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said to him, "I have bought a field, and I must go and see it. Please have me excused." Another said, "I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I go to examine them. Please have me excused." And another said, "I have married a wife, and therefore I cannot come." So the servant came and reported these things to his master. Then the master of the house became angry and said to his servant, "Go out quickly into the streets and the lanes of the city, and bring in the poor and crippled and blind and lame." And the servant said, "Sir, what you have commanded has been done, and still there is room." And the master said to the servant, "Go out into the highways and hedges and compel them to come in, that my house may be filled. For I tell you, none of those men who were invited shall taste my banquet." So let's look at this parable and see if we can learn from it. First, you'll note that there were many who had been invited. And one would assume that if the man had prepared the feast, that those who had been invited had agreed to come. But you'll see that when the time came to actually attend the feast, things had changed. The invitees suddenly had changed their minds about attending. They made excuses. One needed to see their new field. One had to examine oxen. One had a new wife. You cannot say that any of these activities were morally wrong. The man bought a field, not a meth lab. The second had a new team of oxen to work his farm. He was not meeting with some criminal organisation to discuss a turf war. The man had a wife, not a string of girlfriends who he treated shamefully. And yet, legitimate as these activities were, they were not really legitimate excuses. The field would not have dramatically changed, that it could not wait until the morning. The oxen were unlikely to have changed colour while he was at the feast. I'm not sure the man's wife would not have forgotten how to live without her husband for one day. They were just excuses. So we must ask ourselves, if we are making excuses for why we cannot respond to the invitation God offers us. You see, we have been invited to respond to an invitation. The invitation we are to respond to is not to a party, nice though that would be. We have a far more important invitation that we must respond to. We find ourselves in a difficult situation. We are flawed human beings. We can all look back into things that we have done in our lives which were wrong. The standard which we are measured by is God's perfect one, where right and wrong are clearly defined in the Bible. But even if we were to temporarily set aside God's perfect standard and judge ourselves only by our own low standards, we would still fail. Were you to have children, I'm sure that you would want to teach them it was good to be kind to others and respect their elders. Yet, can we say of ourselves that we never talked back to a parent or teacher? Can we truthfully say that we always treated others as we would wish to be treated? We call out for justice when others wrong us, but plead circumstances and upbringing when we have wronged another. I do not exclude myself from this. That's the point. I'm not saying you should live like me. I've not come to tell you that my way of living is the best, and if you were just to be more like me, you would have a good life. In all honesty, if there were more people like me, the world might implode. So we have all failed. We have all flawed. The problem is that if there is to be justice, then these wrongs that we have done must be punished. And it is God alone who can decree what the righteous punishment is. And be warned, there's no way that we can, by our own efforts, escape this punishment. Trying to is simply adding to the wrongs that we have catalogued against us. So where, you say, is the invitation? Well, God provided for us in our distress. We are under judgment, and God gave the most precious thing He had, His own Son, to bear our punishment on our behalf. Jesus died around 2,000 years ago in order that we might escape the punishment for our wrongdoings. His invitation is not to any old party, but rather into the multiple blessings that come with trusting Jesus for our salvation. You see, when we trust Jesus, we are not just safe from the eternal consequences of our wrongdoing, but we also become part of God's family. We become part of the church. We become joint heirs in heaven with Jesus. We become a temple that houses God in the form of the Holy Spirit. We are betrothed to Christ, and we can even look forward to a party in heaven called the Marriage Supper of the Lamb, which you can read about in Revelation 19. You can apply the promise that was made by God in Romans 8, verse 28, which says, "And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to His purpose." That seems to me to be far greater an opportunity than all the food that this earth has ever produced. But were we to look into the Bible, we would see there was another feast that was anticipated, that was described. In Matthew chapter 25, Jesus says, "Then the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were wise. For when the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them, but the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, they all became drowsy and slept. But at midnight there was a cry, 'Here is the bridegroom, come out and meet him.' Then all those virgins rose and trimmed their lamps. And the foolish said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are gone out." But the wise answered, saying, "Since there will not be enough for us and for you, rather go to the dealers and buy for yourselves." And while they were going to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the marriage feast, and the door was shut. Afterwards the other virgins came also, saying, "Lord, Lord, open to us." But he answered, "Truly I say to you, I do not know you. Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour." Notice that the bridegroom was known to be coming to the wedding feast, but they did not know when. 5 were prepared for him to come at any time. 5 were not prepared for his arrival. The same could be said of us. There will be those who are ready for eternity and those who are not. So the question I wish to leave you with is this: are you going to be ready, or are you going to make excuses and miss out? Are you going to spurn the invitation and bear the consequences that go with not accepting the invitation that is offered? Thanks for watching. We should be back to our usual recordings next week, so we hope to see you then.